At 3:47 in the morning, Marcus Bennett stood before a stranger's portrait and whispered words his daughter would never understand. The painting hung in a wing of the mansion where no one ever walked, where dust gathered on furniture wrapped in protective covers and moonlight through floor-to-ceiling windows cast everything in shades of silver and shadow. Margaret Stone looked back at him from her garden chair, captured 6 months before death, found her on an operating table, her blue dress the color of California sky, and her smile suggesting she just heard something that made the world feel lighter. Marcus removed his gray custodial cap and held it against his chest, the way his father had taught him to honor the dead spine, straight shoulders, back eyes forward. For 4 minutes, he would stand here. 4 minutes carved from an 8-hour shift, cleaning floors a billionaire barely walked on. 4 minutes that mattered more than the $16.50 he earned each hour, more than the medical debt crushing him, more than sleep or pride, or the rational voice in his head saying this ritual made no sense. He'd taken this job mopping marble and polishing brass in a 12,000 square foot estate perched on Monterey Bay cliffs, not because he needed the money, though God knows he did. He took it because 3 years ago, a nurse he'd never properly thanked had changed everything, and this portrait was his only way to bridge the distance between gratitude and grace. The woman in the painting had died from a decimal point error, a mistake so small it fit on the head of a pin, and so catastrophic it stopped a human heart. Her daughter had sued One, built a foundation that saved careers and lives. One of those lives belonged to Grace Turner, the oncology nurse, who'd sat with Marcus's dying wife when no one else would. The connections wound through tragedy, like roots through dark soil invisible, until you dug deep enough to see how everything touched everything else. Marcus's lips moved, forming words too quiet for the cameras to hear, and he knew about the cameras had spotted all 24 of them, his first night motion sensors and pressure plates and microphones embedded in smoke detectors. Let her watch. Some things mattered more than privacy. The ocean breathed beyond the windows, constant and indifferent. His reflection in the glass showed a man who'd aged a decade in 3 years, gray threading through dark hair at the temples lines carved deep around eyes that used to smile easier. 41 years old. Widower. Single father. Former CPA now pushing a mop because the gap in his resume and the mountain of medical debt made him unemployable in the profession he'd spent 7 years building. The khakis and button-down shirts hanging in his closet at home belonged to a different man, someone who'd believed hard work and a college degree guaranteed stability. That man died the same day Sarah did, and what remained was this calloused hands, a daughter who needed breakfast by 7:30, and a mother who watched Emma while he cleaned toilets in a house worth more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. 3:51. Marcus checked his watch, the same Timex Sarah had given him for their 5th anniversary battery, replaced twice leather band worn soft as prayer. Emma needed him home by 7:30 sharp. His mother needed the car by 9 for her doctor's appointment. The world kept turning on schedules that didn't care about grief or gratitude, or the fact that standing before this painting felt like the only honest thing Marcus did anymore. He whispered the rest of what he'd come to say, his breath fogging slightly in the climate-controlled air. Then he replaced his cap, nodded once the way soldiers salute the fallen, and returned to work. The library needed vacuuming. The upstairs bathrooms required restocking. He had 4 hours and 13 minutes remaining in his shift, and Marcus Bennett had never missed a deadline in his life. His father, a carpenter who'd built houses with hands that could read wood grain like Braille, had taught him that a man's work was his signature, that you showed the world who you were by how you treated the tasks no one else wanted. Emma would learn work ethic by watching him just as he'd learned it, watching his father measure twice and cut once, watching his grandfather tune engines until they purred. Honest labor had honor. Marcus believed that the way other men believed in God or country or the promises politicians made, he believed it because the alternative that his life had been reduced to this, that Sarah's death had stripped away everything that mattered, was a darkness he couldn't afford to enter. But the truth clawed at him during the quiet hours when even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. 3 years ago, he'd been Marcus Bennett, CPA, managing accounts for clients who trusted him with their financial futures. He'd made $68,000 a year, had health insurance that covered most of Sarah's treatments, lived in a house with a yard where Emma built fairy gardens in the shade of an oak tree older than the neighborhood. Then lung cancer stage 4 in a woman who'd never smoked, never worked with chemicals, never did anything that should have triggered the cells to turn rabid and multiply, had stolen Sarah one breath at a time. The treatments cost $380,000. Insurance covered less than half. Marcus sold the house, cashed out his retirement, took loans against his future until there was no future left to borrow against. He quit his job because he couldn't focus on spreadsheets while his wife was dying, couldn't sit through client meetings, pretending compound interest mattered when Sarah was losing weight so fast her wedding ring slipped off in the hospital bed. After she died, Marcus had tried to return to accounting. 47 applications sent, 3 interviews granted, 0 offers extended. The gap in his resume screamed unreliable, and the medical debt $147,000 remaining even after selling everything made him a risk no firm wanted to take. So he'd taken what he could get: janitorial work night shifts, minimum wage, the kind of job that paid cash, and asked no questions about the 3 years when his life had imploded. He worked at an office building for 6 months, then a private school for 4 always nights, so he could be home when Emma woke up, could make her breakfast and walk her to the bus stop, and pretend that her childhood wasn't built on the wreckage of her mother's death. The Honda he drove had 200,000 miles, and a check engine light that had been glowing for 3 months. He couldn't afford to fix it. Emma needed new shoes. Her toes were cramping in the ones she had, but she hadn't complained because she understood more than any 9-year-old should about the arithmetic of poverty. His coworkers at the estate probably thought he was just another faceless janitor, grateful for $16.50 an hour and the rhythm of work that didn't require thought. They didn't know he'd once managed million-dollar portfolios, didn't know his daughter dreamed of being an astronaut, didn't know he carried grief and debt and determination in equal measure. And that was fine. Marcus didn't need pity. He needed the paycheck. He needed to be home by 7:30 for Emma's breakfast. He needed these 4 minutes at 3:47 to remember that grace still existed in a world that felt designed to crush him. 6 months ago, sitting in a coffee shop during the brief window between dropping Emma at school and trying to sleep, Marcus had picked up a newspaper someone left behind. The business section featured an article about medical ethics foundations, dry reading punctuated by a photograph from some charity gala. He'd almost turned the page. Then he'd seen her, Grace Turner, standing in the background, slightly out of focus, next to a woman the caption identified as Victoria Stone, founder of the Margaret Stone Foundation. Marcus had stared at that photograph until his coffee went cold. Grace looked older silver, threading through her hairlines around her eyes, but he'd have recognized her anywhere. The nurse who'd held Sarah's hand during the final hours. The woman who'd sat with Marcus in the worst moment of his life and made him feel human instead of shattered. He'd tried to find Grace after Sarah died, called the hospital, only to learn she'd quit, left no forwarding information, vanished like an angel whose work was done. But there she was, in Sacramento, working in patient advocacy, and the foundation that had helped rebuild her career after she testified about Margaret Stone's death, after she'd lost everything for telling the truth about medical errors. That foundation belonged to Victoria Stone, the woman whose house Marcus now cleaned at 3 a.m. The connections were too perfect to be coincidence. Grace worked at Pacific Regional Medical from 2020 to 2022 after Victoria's foundation grant helped her rebuild her career following her termination in 2019 for testifying about Margaret Stone's death, the same years Victoria had been building that foundation from the ashes of her mother's preventable death. Margaret Stone died, so Victoria sued, so Grace testified, so Grace lost her job, so Victoria helped Grace, so Grace helped Sarah, so Marcus found hope in the middle of despair. When the staffing agency had called about a night janitor position at an estate in Monterey Bay and mentioned the client was Victoria Stone, Marcus had said yes before hearing the pay rate. This wasn't about money. This was about bearing witness, about saying thank you to a universe that connected broken people through invisible threads of mercy, about standing before the portrait of a woman he'd never met and acknowledging that her death, as terrible as it was, had created ripples that saved his family. Emma was alive and thriving because Grace Turner had made Sarah's final days bearable, had reminded Marcus that kindness existed, had shown him that people still cared, when caring cost them everything. And Grace could only do that because Victoria Stone had built something beautiful from grief. So Marcus came here every night, cleaned floors with the same precision his father had sanded wood, polished brass, until it mirror-shined vacuumed corners where dust accumulated like sediment. He worked with dignity because dignity was the one thing poverty couldn't take. And at 3:47, for exactly 4 minutes, he stood before Margaret Stone's portrait and said the words he'd never gotten to say to Grace. Thank you. I remember. Your kindness mattered. If Victoria Stone was watching through her cameras, and Marcus was certain she was, then let her watch. Some truths deserved to be witnessed. The rest of his shift passed in the familiar rhythm of honest work. Foyer first sweeping the Italian marble in overlapping strokes that left no gaps, mopping backwards so his footprints didn't mar the surface. The baseboards came next, wiped down with a damp cloth, corners checked for grime. Brass fixtures polished until they reflected the overhead lights like mirrors. Main corridor, same process. Kitchen at midnight, emptying trash, wiping counters, checking refrigerator seals. The estate was a monument to wealth Marcus couldn't fathom, imported marble original art furniture worth more than his annual salary, but he treated it the way he'd treat any space entrusted to his care. Sarah used to say he made everything beautiful. He'd laughed, then told her he was just thorough. Now he understood what she meant. The world was full of people who cut corners, who did the minimum required, who treated their work as an inconvenience instead of an offering. Marcus refused to be one of them. His signature went on every floor he mopped, every window he cleaned, every surface he touched. Emma would learn that you didn't need a fancy title to have integrity. You just needed to show up and do the work right. The estate demanded precision Marcus was uniquely qualified to deliver. Each room had its own ecosystem of maintenance, the way light hit windows at different times, revealing streaks invisible at night, the way ocean salt accumulated on brass fixtures despite the climate control, the way dust settled in patterns that told stories about air circulation and human traffic. Most janitors wouldn't notice these things. Most janitors worked fast, checked boxes, moved on. Marcus worked like an artisan, like his father approaching a piece of cherry wood, or his grandfather listening to an engine's subtle misfire. Every surface had a correct way to be cleaned, and taking shortcuts meant the work would show flaws under scrutiny. The marble floors, for instance. Italian Carrara, quarried from the same veins Michelangelo had selected for his sculptures, shipped across an ocean and installed by craftsmen who understood that stone, this fine, deserved reverence. Most people would mop it wet and call it done. Marcus knew better. He swept first with a microfiber dust mop, the kind that captured particles without scratching, working in overlapping passes that ensured nothing was missed. Then he checked for spots, wine stains from some dinner party he'd never attend, scuff marks from shoes that cost more than his monthly rent, the occasional tracked-in dirt from the garden. Each spot got individual attention, the right solution for the right stain applied with a cloth dampened just enough to lift without spreading. Only then came the mop, and even that required technique. Too much water and you risked etching the stone. Too little and you just pushed dirt around. The solution needed to be pH neutral, the mop wrung until barely damp the strokes long, and even always pulling backwards so his footsteps didn't mar what he'd cleaned. He could have done this in half the time if he didn't care. Could have splashed water, dragged a mop, called it good enough. No one would know the difference. Victoria watched through cameras, but she didn't know. Marble from laminate didn't understand the chemistry of cleaning solutions or the physics of proper technique. She saw him working. She didn't see the 10 years of knowledge his father had passed down about how materials responded to treatment, how everything from wood to stone to metal had a grain, a nature, a correct way to be approached. But Marcus would know. And Emma would learn by his example that how you did something mattered as much as whether you did it. When she asked why he spent so long on homework checking and rechecking her fractions, he told her the same thing his father had told him, if you're going to put your name on something, make sure it's worthy of your name. Marcus Bennett's name went on these floors, whether anyone else recognized it or not. 20 years from now, when Emma was grown, and someone asked her what her father did, Marcus wanted her to say he was a janitor and he was the best janitor anyone ever employed. Not because he cleaned faster or cheaper, but because he cleaned right. The library's wood paneling presented different challenges. American walnut harvested from trees that were saplings when his grandfather was born, milled and fitted by craftsmen who'd learned their trade through apprenticeship rather than YouTube videos. Wood was alive in ways stone wasn't. It expanded and contracted with humidity, darkened with age-absorbed oils from human hands. You couldn't just spray and wipe. You had to understand the finish. Was it lacquer or oil wax or polyurethane, and treat it accordingly. Victoria's library was oiled walnut, which meant it needed feeding the way leather needed conditioning. Once a month, Marcus applied lemon oil with a soft cloth, working with the grain, letting the wood drink what it needed, and buffing away the excess. In between, he dusted with barely damp microfiber never aerosol sprays that left residue, never paper towels that left scratches invisible to casual eyes, but devastating to anyone who understood quality. The books themselves required different care. Most of them were decorative, bought by the yard from estate sales to project an image of cultivation. But some were valuable first editions, signed copies volumes bound in leather that would crack if the humidity dropped too low. Marcus didn't touch these. That wasn't his job, and he knew his limits. But he dusted the shelves around them, vacuumed the carpet beneath them, monitored the hygrometer. Victoria probably didn't know she had to make sure conditions stayed stable. Again, no one asked him to do this. No one would notice if he didn't. But his father had taught him that the mark of a craftsman wasn't what people saw. It was what they never had to think about because you'd handled it. The bathrooms were straightforward by comparison tile and porcelain and chrome materials designed to be cleaned surfaces that announced their dirtiness instead of hiding it. But even here, Marcus refused to cut corners. Grout lines got scrubbed with a brush, not just mopped over. Chrome fixtures got polished until they showed no water spots. Mirrors got cleaned with newspaper and vinegar instead of commercial glass cleaner, because newspaper left no streaks, and vinegar cut soap scum better than anything you could buy. These were tricks his mother had taught him, techniques passed down from her mother who'd cleaned houses during the Depression, when doing a job well meant you got called back, and doing it poorly meant your family went hungry. Every night, Marcus moved through the estate the way a musician practiced scales or an athlete ran drills. The repetition wasn't mindless. It was meditation. It was muscle memory building toward mastery. It was proof that even work society dismissed as menial could be performed with artistry if you cared enough to try. And Marcus cared because Emma was watching. Not literally, she was asleep 3 miles away, but in the way children always watch their parents absorbing lessons about who to become. He wanted her to learn that all honest work had dignity, that you could take pride in any job if you did it right, that being a janitor with integrity beat being a CEO without it. At 2:30, he took his break in the staff room, a small space with a table and chairs where he ate the turkey sandwich he'd made at home, drank coffee from the thermos his mother had prepared. The silence settled around him like a familiar coat. He checked his phone 2:32 exactly, and right on schedule, his mother's text arrived. Emma sleeping peacefully. "Don't worry," Marcus typed back quickly. "Thank you, Mom. Love you." At 2:46, his phone buzzed again. She ate all her vegetables tonight. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. His mother, Helen Bennett, 68 years old and widowed herself, lived 3 blocks from Marcus's apartment and watched Emma every night he worked. She'd raised Marcus alone after his father died when Marcus was 12, worked as an elementary school teacher for 30 years, retired with a pension that kept her comfortable but not wealthy. She could have spent her golden years traveling, relaxing, doing the things people were supposed to do when they'd earned their rest. Instead, she showed up every night at 10:15 so Marcus could leave for work, made coffee for his thermos, texted him updates so he wouldn't worry himself sick, and loved Emma with a grandmother's fierce devotion. Marcus owed her more than he could ever repay. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but he ate every bite because wasting food was a sin when money came this hard. His phone glowed in the dim light, showing a wallpaper photo of Emma at her 9th birthday party, gap-toothed smile, dark hair and braids, holding a telescope his mother had scrimped to buy. Emma wanted to be an astronaut. She talked about Europa's subsurface oceans and the possibility of life in ice-covered moons and whether humans would reach Mars in her lifetime. She checked out library books about physics and astronomy, watched documentaries about the cosmos, built models of the solar system from cardboard and paint. Marcus encouraged every question, fostered every curiosity, because dreams mattered even when reality crushed them. Especially then. If Emma grew up believing that a girl whose father cleaned toilets couldn't reach the stars, then poverty had won something more valuable than money. It had won her future. Marcus wouldn't let that happen. He finished his coffee, rinsed the thermos in the staff room sink, and returned to work. The library still needed attention. Shelves dusted books, straightened floors, vacuumed. Marcus noticed the astronomy section leather-bound volumes about celestial mechanics and planetary science first editions, probably worth thousands, sitting pristine and unread on shelves meant for decoration. He ran his fingers along the spines, imagining Emma's delight if she could access books like these. Maybe someday. Maybe when he'd climbed out of debt, when he'd rebuilt enough stability to give her more than scraps and second-hand dreams. Maybe. The hours stretched and compressed the way they always did during night shifts, time becoming elastic, measured in tasks completed rather than minutes passed. At 6:30, Marcus finished the upstairs bathrooms, checked his watch, calculated the drive home. 15 minutes if traffic was light, 20 if it wasn't. He'd arrive by 6:50 shower, quickly start breakfast by 7. Emma would wake at 7:15, come padding into the kitchen in her pajamas, climb onto the stool, and talk about her dreams, while Marcus made scrambled eggs and toast. They'd eat together, just the two of them, and for those 30 minutes, the world would feel right. Then, she'd get ready for school. Marcus would walk her to the bus stop, watch her climb aboard, and wave through the window. He'd return to the apartment collapse, into bed and sleep until 3 in the afternoon, when his alarm would jolt him awake so he could make dinner before Emma got home. This was his life. Narrow, exhausting, built on the scaffolding of a routine that couldn't accommodate surprises. But it was honest. It provided for Emma. It kept them housed and fed and moving forward, even when forward felt like trudging through mud. Marcus signed out at exactly 7 on the electronic tablet, by the service entrance, walked to his Honda in the employee parking area, and drove down the winding road that led from the cliffside estate to the highway. Fog clung to the coastline, thick and gray, turning headlights into diffused halos. The Pacific crashed invisible against rocks below a sound so constant, Marcus had stopped hearing it as separate from silence. Emma was already awake when he arrived, sitting at their small kitchen table, with a math worksheet spread in front of her pencil, moving in careful strokes. She looked up when he entered, face brightening in a smile that made every sleepless hour worth it. "Morning, Dad, I made toast." Marcus saw the slightly burnt edges, the butter spread with enthusiastic imprecision, and felt his chest expand with love, so fierce it hurt. "You're amazing, sweetheart. Let me shower quick, and I'll make eggs." Emma nodded, returning to her math. Marcus stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his daughter work, 9 years old, brilliant, carrying burdens she shouldn't have to carry, and still finding reasons to smile. She had Sarah's eyes, Sarah's stubborn determination, Sarah's gift for making light where there was none. If Marcus could give her nothing else, he'd give her a father who showed up, who kept promises, who demonstrated through daily action that work had dignity, and love required sacrifice, and family meant you never stopped trying. Marcus paused in the kitchen doorway, watching Emma work through her math problems with the kind of focused concentration Sarah used to bring to lesson planning. The resemblance struck him sometimes with physical force, the way Emma chewed her lower lip, when thinking hard, the way she tilted her head exactly 45 degrees, when something didn't make sense, the way her handwriting was already developing Sarah's characteristic loops and flourishes. Genetics and observation combining to resurrect a ghost in the gestures of the living. The toast she'd made sat on a plate beside her worksheet butter, melting into golden pools on the slightly too dark surface. Marcus felt his throat tighten with love so intense it bordered on pain. Emma had gotten herself up, gotten dressed for school, made breakfast, and started homework before he'd even arrived home. 9 years old and already more self-sufficient than some adults Marcus knew. That independence was survival skill born from necessity when your father worked nights and your grandmother watched you sleeping and you woke alone in the apartment. You learned to handle your own morning routine, or you showed up to school hungry and unprepared. Emma had learned. She'd had to. But the fact that she'd had to learn broke something in Marcus every morning. He arrived home to find her already awake. 9-year-olds shouldn't have to be self-sufficient. They should have parents who made them breakfast and helped with homework and were present for the 1,000 small moments that made childhood. Sarah would have been here. Sarah would have made pancakes shaped like stars and helped Emma sound out difficult words and braided her hair before school. Marcus gave Emma what he could the evenings, the weekends, the fierce protective love that colored every decision he made, but the mornings belonged to survival, not parenting. Emma got cereal or toast, got herself dressed, managed her own time all, so Marcus could sleep 4 hours and wake up functional enough to be her father when she got home from school. "You're up early, sweetheart." Marcus kept his voice light casual, like finding his 9-year-old daughter managing her own morning was perfectly normal instead of a daily reminder of how poverty reshaped childhood. "I wanted to finish my homework before school." Emma didn't look up from her worksheet pencil moving in careful strokes. "Mrs. Peterson is giving a quiz today and I want to be ready." That's very responsible. Marcus moved to the counter, started the coffee maker cheap drip machine that made coffee that tasted like hot water that had once met a coffee bean, but they hadn't been formally introduced. "When did you wake up?" 6:30. "I set my alarm." 6:30. Marcus had been signing out of his shift at the estate at 7, had arrived home at 7:15 to find Emma already up for 45 minutes. 45 minutes of a 9-year-old child navigating morning alone because her father's work schedule meant he couldn't be there. "Did you sleep okay?" Emma shrugged. "I had a dream about Mom. We were at the beach and she was teaching me how to find sand dollars. It was nice." The casual mention of Sarah delivered without tears or drama, just a daughter reporting a dream about her dead mother, the way other kids might report dreams about cartoon characters. Emma had been 6 when Sarah died, old enough to remember fragments, Sarah's laugh, her perfume, the way she sang off-key while making dinner, but too young to have formed complete narratives. What Emma knew about her mother came primarily from Marcus's stories, from the photos he'd framed and placed around the apartment like shrines, from the careful mythology he'd constructed to ensure Emma understood she'd been loved fiercely by a woman she could barely remember. "That sounds like a good dream." Marcus poured coffee into his travel mug even though he wasn't traveling anywhere, just needed something to do with his hands. "Your mom loved the beach. We used to take you when you were little. You'd build sandcastles and she'd help you decorate them with shells." I remember a little. Emma finally looked up from her homework. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" The question landed like a fist to the sternum. Marcus set down the coffee mug and moved to sit across from Emma, taking her small hand in his calloused one. "Sweetheart, your mom would be so proud of you, she'd probably cry. You're smart and kind and brave. You work hard at school. You help around the house without being asked. You're patient with Grandma even when she forgets things. You're everything she hoped you'd be." Emma's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She'd learned early that crying didn't change anything, a lesson Marcus wished she'd never had to learn. Even when I get in trouble at school. The question caught Marcus off guard. They hadn't talked about the suspension, yet he'd been planning to address it after breakfast, after Emma had eaten, and they'd had a chance to decompress from the stress of yesterday. But apparently, Emma's mind had been working on it since she woke up. Your mom would understand why you pushed Tyler. She'd tell you the same thing I did. Violence isn't the answer, but defending someone you love isn't wrong. She'd probably also tell Tyler Morrison's father a few things about raising respectful children. Your mom didn't tolerate bullies. Emma smiled despite the tears threatening to fall. Mrs. Anderson says I should ignore kids who say mean things. That they're just jealous or insecure. Mrs. Anderson doesn't have kids calling her dad a loser. Marcus felt anger kindle fresh at the memory of Morrison's condescension at Tyler's casual cruelty, at the way the school had failed to protect Emma until she'd protected herself. You tried ignoring them. You tried telling them to stop. You tried reporting it to adults. They didn't listen. So you pushed Tyler. That was wrong, and you're being punished for it. But I understand why you did it. Are you mad at me? No, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right. I just wish the world was fair enough that you didn't have to. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked across the small kitchen table in the apartment that was clean but shabby, functional but never quite home. Emma's math homework sat forgotten beside the cooling toast. The clock on the microwave clicked over to 7:25. In 5 minutes, they'd need to leave for the bus stop. In 20 minutes, Marcus would return to this apartment and collapse into bed for 4 hours of sleep that never felt like enough. In 8 hours, he'd wake up and make dinner and help with homework and pretend that this life, this narrow, exhausted, perpetually behind-the-curve existence was enough for both of them. But sitting here, holding his daughter's hand while she processed grief and guilt and the complicated ethics of playground justice, Marcus understood that maybe it was enough. Maybe giving Emma a father who showed up, who listened, who validated her feelings while teaching her values mattered more than giving her a father who made 6 figures and worked banker's hours. Maybe the mornings he missed were worth the evenings he was present for. Maybe Dad Emma squeezed his hand. We're gonna be okay, right? Marcus squeezed back. Yeah, sweetheart. We're gonna be okay. The shower was lukewarm because hot water cost money, but it washed away the night's grime and gave Marcus 3 minutes to prepare for the performance of normalcy he'd deliver over breakfast. Emma couldn't know how tired he was, how the debt felt like a physical weight, how some mornings he had to force himself out of bed through sheer willpower. She needed a father, not a victim. So Marcus put on the face, made the egg sat across from her at the table, and listened to her explain her homework. Fractions, denominators, the elegant logic of mathematics that had once been his refuge, and now felt like a language from a previous life. Can you help me with this problem? Marcus looked at the worksheet, saw the equation Sarah would have solved in her head. She'd taught 3rd grade math for 6 years. Loved the way children's faces lit up when abstract concepts suddenly clicked. His throat tightened, but he pushed through it. Of course. What's confusing you? Emma pointed to a word problem about sharing pizza among friends. I know how to do the math, but I don't understand why the answer matters. Marcus smiled despite the ache. Because math teaches you to think clearly, to break big problems into small pieces, to trust that there's always a solution if you're patient enough to find it. like how you're paying off mom's medical bills. The question landed like a punch. Marcus kept his expression steady. Exactly like that sweetheart. Will we ever not be poor? The honesty in her voice, not self-pity, just curiosity about the mechanics of their circumstances, threatened to undo him. We're not poor, Emma. We're between chapters. There's a difference. What's the difference? Marcus took her small hand in his calloused one. Poor means you've given up. Between chapters means you're still writing the story. We're still writing ours. Emma studied his face with the gravity of someone much older. Okay, then I'll write my chapter about becoming an astronaut. That's my girl. They finished breakfast together. Marcus walked Emma to the bus stop 3 blocks away, waited with her in the morning chill while other parents clustered in groups and talked about things Marcus had stopped caring about: soccer games and PTA meetings, and which restaurant had the best brunch. Emma held his hand comfortable in the silence they shared, secure in the knowledge that her father would be here every morning without fail. The bus arrived, hydraulic brakes hissing. Emma climbed aboard, turned at the top step to wave. Marcus waved back, watched the bus merge into traffic, then walked home through a neighborhood where houses cost $500,000 and people watered lawns during droughts. His apartment was in a complex on the edge of respectability, $1,400 a month for 2 bedrooms and a kitchen where the dishwasher only worked half the time. But it was clean. It was safe. It was theirs. Sleep came hard, as it always did, when adrenaline from the night shift collided with the anxiety that lived in his bones. Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, calculating for the 1,000th time whether he could afford Emma's field trip fee, whether the Honda would survive another 6 months, whether the medical debt would ever stop compounding faster than he could pay it. $800 a month went to debt, $1,400 to rent, $1,200 to everything else: food, utilities, gas, Emma's needs. His salary barely covered it. His mother helped with groceries, and babysitting refused to let Marcus pay. Her said family didn't keep ledgers. But Marcus kept his own accounting, knew exactly how much he owed her, knew he'd never be able to repay the gift of her presence in Emma's life. The phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon, jarring Marcus from the shallow doze he'd finally managed. He fumbled for it. Heart-racing calls during the day meant emergencies, meant something had gone wrong with Emma. Mr. Bennett. This is Principal Rodriguez from Seaside Elementary. Marcus sat up, fully awake. Is Emma okay? Physically, yes, but there's been an incident. I need you to come to the school. What kind of incident? Emma got into a fight during lunch. She pushed another student. I'm afraid she's being suspended. Marcus's mind spun. Emma had never been in a fight in her life. She pushed someone, Tyler Morrison. He fell and scraped his elbow. The school has a zero-tolerance policy for physical aggression. What happened before she pushed him? Principal Rodriguez hesitated. The boys were teasing her, but that doesn't excuse violence. What were they saying? Another pause longer. That's something we can discuss when you arrive. Can you be here by 3:15? Marcus looked at the clock. He'd gotten 4 hours of sleep. He had to make dinner for Emma, had to leave for work by 10:30. But his daughter needed him. I'll be there. He dressed in the clothes he'd worn yesterday, khakis, t-shirt, everything rumpled from being slept in, and drove to the school with hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. Seaside Elementary was a sprawling campus in a neighborhood where property taxes funded art programs and science labs, where parents drove luxury SUVs and hired tutors for second graders. Emma attended on a special enrollment variance because the apartment technically fell outside the district boundaries, but Marcus had fought for it, knew good schools mattered more than anything else he could give her. She'd thrived here, made friends, brought home honor roll certificates and essays that teachers praised. What had happened? The principal's office smelled like coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Emma sat in one of the chairs outside, face tear-streaked hands clenched in her lap. 3 boys and their parents occupied the chairs across from her, Tyler Morrison and his father prominent among them. Tyler's father wore an expensive suit, had the bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. He looked at Marcus with barely concealed disdain, gaze lingering on the wrinkled khakis and faded shirt. Mr. Bennett. Principal Rodriguez gestured toward her office. Shall we? Emma's eyes found Marcus's pleading and ashamed in equal measure. Marcus knelt in front of her. Whatever happened, we'll handle it together. Okay. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus stood, straightened his spine, and walked into the principal's office like he was walking into battle. The meeting was brief and humiliating. Tyler Morrison's father, James Morrison, attorney, as he made clear, immediately demanded Emma be expelled for assaulting his son. The principal explained that Emma had pushed Tyler after sustained teasing during lunch. When pressed, she admitted the teasing involved Marcus's profession, comments about janitors, about cleaning toilets, about being poor. Emma had told them repeatedly to stop. Tyler had escalated, called Marcus a loser, and Emma had pushed him. Once, Tyler fell, scraped his elbow, and his father wanted blood. Your daughter needs to learn there are consequences for violence. Marcus fought to keep his voice level. She's 9 years old. She defended herself after being bullied. Bullying is a strong word, Mr. Bennett. What would you call it? Children tease. It's part of growing up. Marcus looked at Tyler's father directly. Is that what you teach your son? That mocking someone's father is just teasing? James Morrison's jaw tightened. I teach my son to use his words, not his fists. So do I. But apparently, words weren't working. Principal Rodriguez intervened. Mr. Bennett, I understand you're upset. But the suspension stands. 3 days, starting tomorrow. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. Emma will serve her suspension. She knows pushing was wrong. But I hope Tyler learns something too. What exactly? That a man's worth isn't measured by his job title. It's measured by his character. The meeting ended without resolution or apology. Marcus took Emma's hand and walked out of the building into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for the anger burning in his chest. In the car, Emma started crying. I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have pushed him. No, you shouldn't have. Violence is never the answer. But they were saying such mean things about you. Marcus pulled into a parking lot, turned to face his daughter. I know what they were saying. And they're wrong. I clean floors because it provides for us. Because it lets me be home when you wake up. There's no shame in honest work. Tyler said you're a loser who cleans toilets. Tyler doesn't understand that a man's character isn't in his wallet. It's in his word and his work. I keep my promises. I show up every day. I take care of you. That makes me successful in the ways that matter. Emma wiped her eyes. I'm proud of you, Dad. And I'm proud of you for defending our family. Even if pushing was wrong, your heart was right. She nodded, processing this complicated calculus of morality and consequence. What happens now? Now we go home. You're suspended for 3 days, starting tomorrow. Which means we have a problem. What kind of problem? Grandma has a doctor's appointment tomorrow morning. I work tomorrow night. We need someone to watch you, and I don't have anyone else. Emma's face fell. Can I just stay home alone? You're 9, sweetheart. That's not safe or legal. Marcus drove toward home mind racing through options that didn't exist. He couldn't miss work, needed every hour, every dollar. His mother's appointment was important, couldn't be rescheduled. There was no one else. No other family, no friends close enough to ask. Just Marcus and Helen and Emma, a triangle of support that had no redundancy, no backup plan for when life threw curveballs. An idea formed terrible and necessary. Victoria Stone, his employer, a woman he'd never spoken to beyond the 6-minute interview 2 months ago. A woman who watched him through cameras every night and probably thought he was strange for visiting her mother's portrait. Asking her for help felt like admitting defeat, like crossing a boundary that couldn't be uncrossed. But Emma came first. Always. If that meant swallowing his pride, then his pride could choke on it. At home, Marcus made dinner while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. Spaghetti, her favorite sauce from a jar, but doctored with garlic and oregano until it tasted homemade. They ate together, watched a nature documentary about Saturn's moons, fell into the routine that kept them both sane. At 9, Emma went to bed. At 10:15, Helen arrived to watch over Emma while she slept. Marcus changed into his uniform, loaded his thermos with coffee his mother had made, kissed Emma's forehead as she dreamed and drove through fog toward the estate. But tonight, he wouldn't go straight to work. Tonight, he'd do something that terrified him more than any debt or dead-end job. He'd ask Victoria Stone for help. He'd make himself vulnerable to a woman who had every reason to see him as just another employee, just another name on a payroll. He'd risk rejection and pity and the possibility that she'd say no, and he'd have to figure out something else he didn't have. The estate appeared through the fog like a vision of another world, glass and steel, and money made architecture perched on cliffs where the Pacific hammered rocks that had stood for millennia. Marcus parked the Honda, smoothed his uniform, and walked to the service entrance on legs that felt unsteady. His hand rose to knock. Paused. If he did this, there was no going back. If he admitted he needed help, he'd be admitting that the facade of competence he'd maintained for 3 years was exactly that, a facade thin as paper, ready to tear. But Emma needed him. And sometimes being a good father meant being brave enough to be weak. Marcus knocked. Diana Mitchell answered the door with practiced efficiency, reading tension in Marcus's shoulders before he'd spoken a word. "Is everything all right, Marcus? Family emergency. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent." "Is Miss Stone available?" Diana studied him day clothes instead of uniform worry carved into his face, then nodded. "Let me check." Marcus waited in the service corridor where boundaries between employer and employee felt absolute until you needed to cross them. Then Victoria Stone appeared different in natural light. Jeans, cashmere sweater, reading glasses pushed into loose hair. Barefoot. That detail struck hardest the billionaire in her own home, human and unguarded. "Mr. Bennett." Curiosity without judgment. "Is there a problem?" "No, ma'am. I need to ask a favor about my daughter." Victoria moved closer. "Is she hurt?" "Suspended. 3 days. She got in a fight, and my mother has a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I work tomorrow night. No one to watch Emma. I was hoping she could stay in the staff room while I work." "How old is your daughter?" 9. "Too young to be alone." Victoria's response came swift and decisive. "What if she stayed upstairs? Guest room would be more comfortable." "Miss Stone." "I couldn't ask Victoria. If we're having this conversation, call me Victoria." She paused. "I'm offering. She can have dinner, watch TV. You check on her during your break. That's incredibly generous, but you don't know if Emma's trustworthy. I know you." Victoria's voice softened. If you raised her, she's worthy of trust." The words landed warm and unfamiliar in Marcus's chest. "Thank you. I can't thank you enough. You just did. Bring her at 6. After Marcus left, Diana found Victoria staring at empty space where he'd stood. "You invited his daughter to stay overnight. I'm helping a single father who asked for help." Diana's smile was knowing. "In 4 years, I've never seen you make pancakes at dawn or offer guest rooms to employees' children. He's different." "Yes. The question is what you're going to do about that." The way Marcus looked at her, grateful, vulnerable, trusting, shifted something fundamental in Victoria's understanding of safety. It wasn't cameras or contracts. It was showing up and keeping promises made while looking someone in the eye. After Marcus left, Victoria led Emma to the kitchen where she'd attempted pasta. The sauce came from a jar, but she'd added fresh basil and garlic she'd minced herself. Emma ate with polite focus. A child taught manners mattered even when nervous. "Your dad says you like astronomy." Emma's face transformed. "I'm studying Europa Jupiter's moon. It might have oceans under ice with alien microbes." "Isn't that amazing?" Victoria smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "That's incredible. What got you interested in space?" "Mom got me a telescope before she got sick. We'd look at stars together. Now Dad tells me about them, so I remember her." The casual reference to loss delivered with 9-year-old pragmatism made Victoria's chest ache. "Your mom sounds wonderful. Dad says she laughed at her own jokes before the punchline. Always ruined them. He misses that laugh. Do you miss her, parts of her? I was 6 when she died. Mostly I remember feelings. Safe. Loved. Dad makes sure I still feel those things." They talked through dinner about school science, the unfairness of suspensions when defending your father. Emma explained the fight with matter-of-fact clarity. Tyler and friends calling Marcus a loser who cleaned toilets, Emma telling them to stop repeatedly, Tyler escalating, Emma pushing once. He fell, scraped his elbow. Now she was suspended. "What did your dad say?" "That violence is never the answer, but my heart was right." Emma picked at pasta. "Kids think because Dad's a janitor, we're poor. We are poor, but not the bad kind. Just the working through it kind. What's the difference?" "Dad says poor means you've given up. Working through it means you're still writing your story." Victoria felt something crack open inside her. "That's beautiful." After homework fractions, Emma grasped instantly. Victoria led her to the guest room, where 4-poster bed and ocean view overwhelmed the girl with wonder she tried hiding. "This room is beautiful. I'm glad you like it. Can I ask you something?" "Always. Why are you being so nice to us? Dad's just your janitor." Victoria knelt, taking Emma's hands. "Your father isn't just anything. He's a good man who works hard and loves you fiercely. Good people deserve kindness. Plus, I like you. You remind me the world isn't all spreadsheets and security cameras." Emma hugged her spontaneously, and Victoria froze before her arms remembered how to return the embrace. When had anyone last hugged her? The girl smelled like children's shampoo and possibility. "Can I come back sometime?" "Anytime, sweetheart." After Emma slept, Victoria stood in the doorway, watching, steady breathing, thinking about the man who worked through exhaustion so this child could dream safely. Marcus had said Victoria didn't know Emma well enough to trust her protecting Victoria while putting his daughter in her care. That twisted logic only made sense if Marcus trusted Victoria completely while assuming Victoria shouldn't trust him. She'd watched him 6 weeks through cameras analyzing patterns. Now his daughter slept in her guest room, and Victoria understood she hadn't been watching to assess threat. She'd been watching because he made her feel hope, or curiosity, or the first stirrings of attraction she'd been too afraid to name. Victoria returned to her study after Emma fell asleep intending to review quarterly reports that required her signature by morning. But the documents sat untouched on her desk while she stared at the guest room monitor, not watching Emma, just confirming the feed still worked, a habit so ingrained she couldn't break it even when trying to practice trust. The irony wasn't lost on her. She just told Marcus his daughter was safe, had promised protection without surveillance, had opened her home to a child she'd known for 3 hours, based entirely on faith in a man she'd watched through cameras for 6 weeks. And now, here she sat monitoring the guest room, like Emma might vanish if Victoria looked away. She forced herself to close the surveillance software. The screen went dark. 23 other cameras still recorded every corner of the estate, but the guest room was now a blind spot, a vulnerability, a choice to value privacy over control. The absence of the feed felt like missing a limb. Victoria had installed the first cameras 3 days after her mother's funeral. 24 high-definition units with motion sensors and night vision feeding into a dedicated server that stored 30 days of footage before overwriting. She'd told herself it was about security. A woman living alone in a valuable property needed protection, but security firms had recommended 8 cameras. Victoria had installed 24. Security protocols suggested monitoring entry points and perimeter. Victoria monitored every room, every hallway, every square foot of the 12,000 square foot estate, because her mother had died from something Victoria hadn't seen coming. Because Margaret Stone had gone into a routine surgery, trusting the anesthesiologist who'd done 1,000 procedures, and that trust had killed her when a decimal point shifted and 0.7 milligrams became 7.0 milligrams, and her mother's heart stopped before anyone realized the mistake. Victoria had been in a board meeting, had stepped out to take the hospital's call, had driven through traffic while her mother died surrounded by strangers who'd been too late recognizing their error. You couldn't prepare for that, couldn't predict it, couldn't prevent it by watching more carefully or installing better systems. But Victoria had tried anyway, had built the foundation, had sued the hospital, had changed protocols that would save future patients. And then she'd come home to the empty estate her mother had left her and realized she was alone in a way that felt dangerous. So she'd installed cameras, had hired staff she could monitor, had created systems where nothing happened without her knowledge. It hadn't made her feel safer. It had made her feel crazy. But she couldn't stop. Every morning she reviewed footage from the night before, watching Diana arrive and prepare the kitchen, watching the groundskeepers trim hedges, watching the chef who came Tuesdays and Thursdays prepare meals Victoria ate alone. She told herself she was ensuring quality, maintaining standards, protecting her investment. Really, she was watching because the watching itself was a ritual that said, I am in control. Nothing will surprise me. No one will die on my watch. Then Marcus Bennett had appeared on the night shift cameras, and the watching had changed. At first, he'd been just another employee, someone to monitor for theft or negligence, or the 1,000 ways people failed when they thought no one was looking. But Marcus didn't fail. He showed up exactly on time, worked with meticulous care, never touched what wasn't his, never complained about the work. And at 3:15 every morning, he walked to the portrait wing and stood before Margaret Stone's painting and whispered words Victoria's microphones couldn't quite capture. That's when the watching had become something else, something that felt less like surveillance and more like connection. She'd started waiting for 3:15, started anticipating Marcus's vigil, started wondering what words he was saying to a woman he'd never met. The mystery of it had consumed her. She'd run background checks, had found the gap in his resume and the medical debt and the widower status. She'd learned Emma's name, and age had discovered Sarah Bennett's death certificate, had traced Marcus's employment history through the scattered jobs that paid cash and asked few questions. But none of it explained the portrait visits. None of it explained why a janitor would stand for exactly 4 minutes every night talking to a painting of a woman who died 6 years ago. Now she knew. Grace Turner, the nurse who testified about Margaret's death and lost everything. The nurse Victoria's foundation had helped rebuild. The nurse who'd cared for Sarah Bennett during her final months. The invisible threads that connected tragedy to grace to this moment. Victoria opened her laptop and pulled up the foundation's grant database. Grace Turner's file was thick with documentation. The initial application after she'd been fired from Pacific Medical, the committee review that had unanimously approved funding the progress reports she'd submitted over 2 years, showing how she'd rebuilt her career in patient advocacy. Nowhere in those documents did it mention Sarah Bennett. Nowhere did it explain that the grant money had rippled forward to save not just Grace's career, but a dying woman's dignity and a widower's sanity and a child's memory of her mother's final days. The foundation had helped 317 medical professionals since its inception. Victoria had reviewed their applications, had signed their approval. Letters had tracked their outcomes and aggregate data that showed the foundation was achieving its mission. But she'd never known the individual stories, had never understood that grants weren't just numbers in a database. They were Grace Turner sitting with Sarah Bennett. They were Marcus whispering thank you to a portrait. They were Emma growing up knowing her mother had died with dignity because a nurse cared enough to stay. Margaret Stone's death had created this. Her preventable, senseless, infuriating death from a decimal point error had led to a lawsuit that led to a foundation that led to Grace Turner's second chance, that led to Sarah Bennett's peaceful death, that led to Marcus standing in this estate whispering gratitude. Victoria sat in her study surrounded by screens that showed empty rooms and realized her mother's death hadn't been meaningless. It had been terrible and unfair and something Victoria would never stop grieving. But it had also been the first domino in a chain that saved people Victoria would never meet, that created ripples still spreading 3 years after Sarah died and 6 years after Margaret died. That was worth witnessing. Not through cameras, through connection. She picked up her phone and composed a text to Marcus. Emma's asleep. "I'm making pancakes at 7. Come hungry." His response came 3 minutes later. "You don't have to do that." Victoria smiled and typed back, "I want to. See you at 7. Then she closed the surveillance software, completely powered down the monitors, and went to the kitchen to figure out how to make pancakes from the expensive ingredients her chef kept stocked and she'd never touched. Marcus moved through his shift with focus, fractured by worry. Emma upstairs, safe with a woman who'd shown more kindness in one evening than Marcus had experienced in 3 years, but the strangeness kept pulling his attention. He mopped the same foyer section twice, polished brass beyond necessity, reorganized supplies because his hands needed work, his mind couldn't track. At 2:30, he found Victoria waiting in the staff room with 2 mugs of coffee already poured. "Hi." Marcus stopped in the doorway. "You didn't have to wait up. I wanted to." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. "Emma's sleeping peacefully. She's wonderful, Marcus. Thank you for this. I know it's above and beyond. It's what people do when people they care about need help." Marcus sat slowly, trying to parse what people they care about meant. How was your evening-long board meeting? Lawsuit settled. Yours Emma aced her astronomy test. 98%. That's wonderful. You must be proud. Beyond proud. Talking about Emma always made him vulnerable. She's my whole world. She told me about her telescope, about watching stars with her mother. The mention of Sarah should have hurt more. Instead, Marcus felt something loosen. Sarah was a teacher, 3rd grade. She loved watching kids' faces light up when concepts clicked. Emma has that gift. The way she explained Europa's oceans, she made me care about moons I'd never thought about. She gets that from her mother. I just try to keep her curious. You're doing more than trying. Emma is confident, articulate kind. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you show up every day and do the work. Victoria's expression shifted, like cleaning floors with dignity, even when no one's watching. Like that, they sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the mansion settled and the ocean breathed beyond walls. Marcus studied Victoria's face, 41, brilliant, isolated by wealth she'd earned carrying scars from loss that taught her the world wasn't safe. She'd built cameras and distance to protect herself. He'd built routine and walls to survive. Neither had succeeded at stopping the hurt. Can I ask you something? Victoria's voice was careful. Always. Why this job, specifically this estate? Marcus had prepared partial truths, but sitting here at 2:30 with a woman who'd fed his daughter and put her to bed and looked at him like he mattered, he didn't want to lie. 6 months ago, I saw a newspaper photo. Charity gala. Grace Turner in the background standing next to you. Victoria went still. Grace Turner, the nurse who testified about my mother's death. Yes, Grace worked at Pacific Regional Medical from 2019 to 22. Oncology. She cared for my wife during Sarah's final months. Understanding dawned. Grace was Sarah's nurse. More than that. She sat with Sarah when I had to leave, held her hand, made her feel human instead of dying. Sarah died in Grace's arms with me beside her. I tried finding Grace afterward to thank her. She'd left the hospital, disappeared, and you saw her photo. Next to me. Marcus nodded. Your foundation helped Grace rebuild after she lost her job for testifying. I researched. Found Grace's grant came from the Margaret Stone Foundation. Found she'd worked at Pacific Regional during Sarah's illness. All the connections lined up. So you took this job to be near the portrait, to thank my mother because her death led to Grace having the career that allowed her to care for Sarah. Your mother died from medical error, Sarah from cancer. But your mother's death created something that rippled forward and saved my family from drowning in grief alone. I needed to acknowledge that, to witness that Grace exists. Victoria's eyes glistened. I had no idea. The foundation helped hundreds. I never knew the individual stories. You couldn't know, but I did. And I'm telling you now, your mother's death, terrible as it was, gave my wife dignity in her final days. Gave me strength to keep going for Emma. That matters more than you can understand. She reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture was instinctive, and Marcus felt the contact like electricity, her skin soft against his calluses, warm and alive. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for listening, for not thinking I'm crazy for visiting a portrait every night. I watched you for weeks trying to figure out why. Now I know. You weren't being suspicious. You were being grateful. I still am. They sat holding hands, employer and employee, billionaire and janitor, Two people who'd lost parents and spouses and learned money couldn't buy safety, and cameras couldn't capture what mattered. Marcus knew he should let go, step back from this dangerous intimacy. But Victoria's hand fit perfectly in his, and her eyes held his without flinching. "I should get back to work." His voice came rough. "Of course." Victoria released his hand slowly. "I'll see you when your shift ends. Breakfast together. You, me, Emma. You don't have to. I want to." Marcus, the way she said his name made his chest tighten. "Okay. Breakfast sounds good." He returned to work with trembling hands and thoughts that circled the conversation, the confession, the moment everything shifted to something undefined and terrifying. At 3:15, Marcus walked to the portrait wing as always, but tonight felt different. He stood before Margaret Stone's painted face and whispered gratitude, adding something new. "Your daughter knows now. About Grace Sarah, why I come here. She didn't think I was crazy. She listened." He stopped, couldn't say what his heart suspected, that he was falling for Victoria, and the falling felt like betrayal and hope braided together. So he stood silent until his watch read 3:19. At 7, Marcus signed out and arrived home to find Victoria already in the kitchen attempting pancakes. Emma sat at the counter, giggling at burnt edges, Victoria wielding a spatula with determined incompetence. Marcus stopped in the doorway, hit by longing so intense it bordered on pain. This was what mornings could look like. You're supposed to flip them before they burn. Victoria turned, smiled with openness that made Marcus forget breathing. "I'm a tech CEO, not a chef. Let me help." Marcus took the spatula, and their fingers brushed. Both froze. Emma chattered obliviously about dreams while Marcus and Victoria stood close enough he could smell her perfume and see her pulse beating too fast. "Your dad's the best cook. It's nothing special." "I disagree." Victoria's voice meant only for him. They finished breakfast together, eating burnt-edged pancakes with syrup, pretending this was normal instead of everything changing. When they left at 8, Emma hugged Victoria goodbye, and Marcus stood witness to his daughter's heart opening. "Thank you, Victoria, for everything." "You're welcome, Marcus." Their eyes held too long, said too much. Emma tugged Marcus toward the car, and the moment broke, but the feeling stayed. Diana found Victoria in the kitchen an hour later, staring at plates, mugs, evidence of connection undeniable. "You made pancakes." "I did. For a man who cleans your floors. For a man raising his daughter alone while drowning in debt and still finds grace to thank strangers who helped him." Diana moved closer. "What's happening here? I don't know." Victoria met her eyes. "But I want to find out. You're falling for him." The words hung undeniable and terrifying. Victoria thought about lying, but Diana had worked 4 years, earned honesty. "Yes. And it's impossible and inappropriate and probably destructive." "Why? Because he's my employee. I'm a billionaire. He's a janitor. This could never work." Diana sat. Love doesn't care about tax brackets. It cares about character. Marcus Bennett has more character than most men I've met. But the power imbalance is only a problem if one exploits it. Are you planning to manipulate him? God, no. Is he planning to use his position for your money? Marcus would quit before accepting anything he hadn't earned. Then, where's the imbalance? You have money. He has integrity. Both matter. What if I'm not good enough for him? The question escaped before Victoria could stop it. Diana's expression softened. "You're a billionaire, asking if you're good enough for a janitor. Most people would laugh. Most people would be wrong." Marcus shows up with dignity, raises Emma with love, visits my mother's portrait to thank the universe, That's worth more than my bank account. So what will you do? Victoria thought about Marcus's hands holding Emma with gentleness, his voice full of love. Death hadn't erased the way he'd looked at her like she was worth seeing. I'm going to try. I don't know how. But I'm going to try. Diana smiled. He's changing you already. 6 months ago, you wouldn't have made pancakes or admitted you're falling for someone. He's teaching you to be human. And you're teaching him he deserves good things. After Diana left, Victoria found Emma's thank you note on the pillow. Thank you for letting me stay. You make my dad smile. That's the best thing anyone could do. Victoria sat on the bed and cried for the first time in 6 years, not from grief, but overwhelming recognition that something precious had entered her fortress, and she had no idea how to protect it without destroying it. She'd built cameras and distance to prevent loss. But Emma's note proved what Marcus had been teaching. Safety didn't come from surveillance. It came from showing up and trusting that connection mattered more than control. Her phone buzzed, Marcus texting while he should sleep. Thank you for last night. Emma's already asking when she can visit again. Victoria typed back. Any time. I mean that. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Can we talk? Not as employer and employee. Just Marcus and Victoria. Yes? When tonight, after my shift staff room, I'll be there. Victoria stared at her reflection. She looked different, softer, less protected, more alive. The fortress was developing cracks, and instead of terror, she felt relief. Marcus had walked through her defenses with honesty and integrity and quiet strength of a man who'd survived hell without losing his capacity for gratitude. Tonight, they'd talk about whatever was building between them, fragile and impossible, and more real than anything Victoria had felt since her mother died. She was terrified. She was hopeful. She was falling for a man who cleaned her floors and visited portraits and raised his daughter with love so fierce it made Victoria ache. But she did ache for it. Connection, witness, someone who saw her not as the billionaire, but as Victoria, scared and lonely, and trying to figure out how to be human in a world designed to isolate her. Marcus saw her, and she saw him. Everything else was details they'd figure out together. That evening, after Marcus had slept his 4 hours and made dinner and helped Emma with homework, they sat together on their small balcony, watching the sun set over a neighborhood they couldn't afford. Emma had been quiet through dinner, picking at her spaghetti, answering questions in monosyllables. Something was working on her. Dad Emma's voice was small the way it got when she was trying to ask something important without seeming like she cared about the answer. Yeah, sweetheart. Are we going to be poor forever? Marcus set down the book he'd been reading, library copy of a thriller he was only half following, and looked at his daughter. She was staring out at the sunset, not meeting his eyes, trying to seem casual about a question that clearly wasn't. What makes you ask that? Emma shrugged. Tyler Morrison said his dad makes $1 million a year, and I was thinking, you work every night, and we still don't have money for things. So, is this just how it's gonna be? Marcus felt the question like a weight settling on his chest. How did you explain to a 9-year-old that poverty wasn't a permanent condition, but escaping it required resources they didn't have? That he was working as hard as he could, but medical debt and single parenthood, and a job market that didn't value gaps in resumes, meant they were running in place, not moving forward. We're not poor, Emma. We're building towards something better. But We are poor. Emma finally looked at him, eyes serious. I hear you on the phone with Grandma talking about which bills to pay first. I see you check the price of everything at the grocery store. I know you work all night and sleep during the day, and you're always tired. That's poor Dad. The blunt assessment delivered with 9-year-old clarity cut deeper than condescension from lawyers or pity from strangers. Emma wasn't judging. She was just stating facts she'd observed, trying to understand the economics that shaped her childhood. You're right. Marcus decided honesty mattered more than protecting Emma from reality she already understood. We are poor by the standards of this neighborhood. Your friend Tyler's family has more money than we'll probably ever have. But there are different kinds of poor, sweetheart. What do you mean poor can mean you don't have money? Or it can mean you don't have hope. We're the first kind, but not the second. I work every night because I believe it's building towards something. We're paying off Mom's medical bills little by little. We're keeping you in a good school. We're making sure you have opportunities. That's not just surviving, that's fighting for a better future. Emma considered this. But what if fighting isn't enough? What if we fight and nothing changes? Then we'll have fought with integrity, and that matters. Marcus reached over and took Emma's hand. I know you're only 9, and this is a lot to think about, but I need you to understand something. Poverty is real. The struggle is real. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But giving up is a choice, and we're not making it. Is that why you go to college? Emma asked. To get a better job. The question confused Marcus until he realized Emma was talking about the estate. I don't go to college, sweetheart. I go to work. But you're always studying. Emma gestured vaguely. With your books about business and stuff. Grandma says you're trying to improve yourself. Marcus smiled despite himself. His mother had apparently been explaining his post-shift reading library books about management and business administration that he consumed in the hours between getting home and falling asleep, desperate to fill the knowledge gaps that might make him employable again. I'm learning. That's different than going to college. Why don't you just go to college then? If you learned enough, you could get a better job. College costs money we don't have. And it takes time I don't have. And I'd need to stop working, which means we'd have no income. It's complicated. Emma was quiet for a long moment, sunset painting her serious face in shades of orange and gold. Then Victoria's really rich, right? Where Marcus had been worried this conversation was going, it had arrived. Yes, she's very rich. And she likes you. I saw how she looked at you when you were washing dishes last night. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. Emma Victoria is my employer. She was being kind to both of us. But she didn't have to let me stay. She didn't have to make me dinner or help with homework or any of it. Emma turned to face Marcus fully. She did it because she likes you, and you like her. I can tell. It's complicated. Adults always say that. Emma's voice carried the exasperation of children everywhere faced with adults who wouldn't state obvious truths. You like her. She likes you. She's rich. We're poor. She could help us. Why is that complicated? Because Marcus stopped trying to find words for pride and dignity and the fear that accepting help meant admitting defeat. Because I need to take care of you myself. That's what fathers do. But Grandma helps us all the time. You let her watch me and make food and give us money for groceries. Why is that okay? But Victoria helping isn't. The logic was airtight and devastating. Marcus struggled for a response that didn't sound like hypocrisy. Grandma's family, that's different. Why? Because family helps family. Victoria is... Marcus trailed off, unable to finish the sentence because he didn't know what Victoria was. Employer, friend, something more. He wasn't ready to name Victoria makes you smile. Emma's voice was soft, now serious. You smile different with her than with other people. You smile like you used to smile in pictures with Mom. The comparison stopped Marcus's breath. He stared at his daughter, this 9-year-old who saw everything he'd been trying to hide. Mom's been gone 3 years. Emma reached over and took Marcus's other hand so she was holding both of them. I miss her every day. But I also see you missing her every day. And last night, when you were with Victoria, you didn't look like you were missing Mom. You looked happy. Sweetheart, it's okay to be happy, Dad. Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she died. She said, make sure Daddy doesn't forget to live. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. You remember her saying that I remember everything about Mom that matters. Emma squeezed his hands. And I think being happy with Victoria matters. I think letting her help us matters. I think maybe we don't have to fight alone just because you're proud. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. Emma grinned, breaking the tension. You just finally started listening. They sat together on the balcony as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Emma pointed out constellations she'd learned from the library books Marcus bought her, tracing invisible lines between points of light that were actually trillions of miles apart, but looked connected from Earth. Dad Emma's voice was sleepy now, the philosophical conversation giving way to a 9-year-old's bedtime. Yeah, I like Victoria. I think she's good for you. Marcus pulled Emma close, kissed the top of her head. I like her too, sweetheart. So maybe stop being so proud and let her like you back. Marcus laughed, despite the tears still threatening. Deal. They sat together until Emma yawned and Marcus carried her inside for bed, tucking her in with the same routine they'd followed since Sarah died. 3 kisses, 2 hugs, 1 wish for dreams about stars, and the people who loved you. Then he stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, thinking about what she'd said about happiness and pride and fighting alone. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to stop treating help like weakness and connection like danger. Maybe Victoria Stone offering kindness wasn't charity, it was grace. And maybe accepting that grace honored Sarah's memory better than refusing it out of stubborn pride. The call came Wednesday afternoon while Marcus slept fitfully. Emma's school. Principal Rodriguez's voice carrying an edge. Mr. Bennett, we need you here by 2. Tyler Morrison's father filed a formal complaint. He's demanding Emma be expelled for pushing his son once he's claiming ongoing harassment. Says Emma's been bullying Tyler for weeks. Marcus sat up, fury cutting through exhaustion. That's a lie. Can you be here at 2? I'll be there. He'd gotten 4 hours sleep. Not enough. But Emma came first. Always. Marcus dressed and drove to Seaside Elementary with jaw clenched. James Morrison was trying to destroy his daughter because Emma had defended Marcus. That calculation was simple and infuriating. The meeting convened at 2 sharp. Tyler and his father on one side, Emma and Marcus, the other Principal Rodriguez, in the middle. James Morrison wore a suit costing more than Marcus made in a month. Mr. Bennett. Morrison didn't offer his hand. I hope you understand the seriousness of your daughter's behavior. I understand she defended herself after being bullied. Children tease. It's normal. Calling someone's father a loser isn't teasing. It's cruelty. Principal Rodriguez intervened. Mr. Morrison, you filed a complaint alleging Emma harassed Tyler for weeks. Do you have evidence Morrison slid papers across the table? Written statements from Tyler's friends corroborating Emma was verbally aggressive. Marcus scanned them, felt ice replace fire. Technically accurate, but stripped of context. Yes, Emma had told them to stop. Yes, she'd raised her voice. But the statements omitted what they'd been saying, omitted everything that mattered. These don't mention what Tyler was saying to provoke Emma. Children don't need provocation to be aggressive. Some simply have anger issues. My daughter doesn't have anger issues. She has a sense of justice. Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, I understand your circumstances are difficult. Single father, working nights, financial pressures. Those stresses create behavioral problems. Perhaps Emma needs counseling to process her anger at her situation. The condescension was surgical, designed to humiliate while sounding concerned. Marcus felt fists ball beneath the table, rage surge hot, the urge to shove Morrison the way Emma shoved Tyler. But that would prove Morrison's point. So Marcus forced his voice level. My daughter's situation is that she lost her mother and watched her father work 3 jobs to pay medical debt. She's learned more about resilience than most adults understand. That doesn't need counseling. That deserves respect. Respect doesn't excuse assault. One push isn't assault. It's a 9-year-old losing her temper after sustained provocation. Principal Rodriguez cleared her throat. Mr. Morrison is requesting expulsion. I'm inclined toward longer suspension. 2 weeks, mandatory counseling, formal apology. Marcus opened his mouth to argue. Then the door opened and Victoria Stone walked in. She wore a business suit probably costing what Marcus made in 6 months' heels. Clicking authority expression, Marcus had never seen cold fury wrapped in perfect professional composure. She didn't apologize, didn't ask permission, simply moved beside Marcus's chair and addressed the room like she owned it. I'm Victoria Stone. I'm here on behalf of the Bennett family. Morrison's eyebrows rose. I wasn't aware Mr. Bennett had retained counsel. I'm not counsel. I'm a concerned friend. And before this goes further, everyone should see the actual evidence. Victoria pulled an iPad, placed it on the table, pulled up documents Marcus had never seen. Written statements from 3 parents whose children witnessed the incident. Timestamps from Emma's attempts to report bullying to monitors who dismissed her. Screen captures from the school's anti-bullying policy, highlighting protections against socioeconomic discrimination. According to witnesses, Tyler Morrison harassed Emma Bennett for 2 weeks, calling her trailer trash, mocking her father's profession, saying she smells poor. Emma reported this 4 separate times. Nothing was done. Principal Rodriguez went pale. I wasn't aware. On the day of the incident, Tyler told Emma, your dad is a loser who cleans toilets. You're trash, just like him. Emma pushed him once. That's the entire story. Morrison's jaw tightened. Those are hearsay from children. Victoria slid signed documents across. Written by parents. Notarized. Would you like to review them? Silence stretched taut. Marcus stared at Victoria. This woman who'd gathered evidence he didn't know existed, who'd taken time from running a company to defend his daughter, who looked at Morrison like he was something scraped off an expensive shoe. Pride and gratitude and something fiercer tangled until breathing hurt. Furthermore, Victoria's voice could cut glass. I've reviewed the anti-bullying policy. Tyler's behavior constitutes harassment based on socioeconomic status. Emma's response was self-defense after the school failed to protect her. If anyone should face consequences, it's your son, Mr. Morrison. Principal Rodriguez found her voice. This is highly irregular. What's irregular is a wealthy parent using position to bully a child whose crime was defending herself. Victoria turned to Tyler. Your father is a lawyer. Emma's father is a janitor. Both work hard. The only difference is one of you was taught to respect honest labor and one hasn't. That's a failure of parenting, not character. Morrison stood. This is outrageous. Please contact the district. Victoria stood as well. I'll be happy to explain how Seaside Elementary ignored bullying complaints, then attempted to expel the victim. I'm sure the superintendent would find that fascinating, especially when local news picks it up. You're threatening me. I'm stating facts. You choose how to interpret them. The meeting ended with Emma's suspension reduced to 3 days. Tyler assigned to write an apology, Morrison storming out with hollow threats. Marcus sat stunned Emma beside him, equally wide-eyed. Victoria gathered her iPad, turned to Marcus. Can we talk outside? In the parking lot away from witnesses, Marcus found words. How did you get those statements? Made calls this morning. Spoke to parents. Explained the situation. People help when you ask directly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Emma was being railroaded. I couldn't let that happen. Why Marcus moved closer? Why risk Morrison's anger, bad publicity, anything for us? Victoria met his eyes, and whatever had been building crystallized into something undeniable, because when someone you care about needs you, you show up. Grace Turner taught us both that. Marcus felt ground shift. Someone you care about, yes, Marcus. Someone I care about. The words hung heavy with meaning. Emma appeared running across the parking lot, and the moment fractured but didn't break. Victoria. You were amazing, like a superhero. Victoria knelt. You defended your dad because you love him. That's what heroes do. I just made sure people understood. Can you come for dinner tonight? Please. Marcus started protesting. Emma. Victoria's busy, but Victoria was already nodding. I'd love to. What time? 6 o'clock. Victoria looked at Marcus for confirmation. He should say no, maintain boundaries, protect them from whatever was growing too fast. But Emma's hopeful face and Victoria's soft smile and his own longing won over caution. 6 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Driving home, Emma chattered while Marcus gripped the wheel, processing that the woman he was falling for had defended his daughter like Emma was worth fighting for, had looked at him and said, someone you care about had agreed to come to his apartment, like crossing that threshold was natural instead of catastrophic. His phone buzzed at a red light. Victoria's text. Thank you for letting me help. See you at 6. Marcus typed back. Thank you for fighting for Emma. For seeing her. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I see you both. That's why I care. The apartment looked smaller with Victoria standing in it, worn furniture and peeling paint suddenly visible. But she smiled when Emma gave the tour. This is the living room. This is my room. With the telescope, this is Dad's boring room. And settled at their small table like she belonged. Helen arrived at 5:30, carrying lasagna because she'd insisted on helping. She took one look at Victoria, eyes going wide, but teaching had trained her in graceful recoveries. You must be Victoria. Marcus has told me so much. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. Mom. All good things. Helen embraced Victoria like old friends. Thank you for helping Emma today. Happy to do it. Emma deserves protection. Dinner was beautiful chaos. Emma talking over everyone. Helen asking about Victoria's company with genuine interest. Victoria answering while sneaking glances at Marcus that made his pulse race. They ate Helen's lasagna and Marcus's garlic bread, and the conversation flowed, despite the strangeness of a billionaire at a table that wobbled unless you folded cardboard under one leg. After dinner, Helen took Emma to the living room for a documentary giving Marcus and Victoria deliberate space. They washed dishes at the sink shoulders, touching hands, brushing when Victoria passed plates. "Your family is wonderful." Victoria's voice was soft. "They're everything I have. Emma adores you. She talked about you all last night, about how you make her dad smile." Marcus set down the dish he'd been drying. "Do I make you smile?" Victoria turned close enough Marcus could see gold flecks in her eyes close enough. Breathing her jasmine scent made his head swim. "Yes. You make me feel things I thought I'd lost." "What things, Hope?" "Curiosity. The possibility I don't have to be alone forever." Marcus's hand cupped her face before his brain authorized movement. "Victoria, I'm falling for you. I've been trying not to. You're a billionaire, I'm a janitor, but I can't stop thinking about you. I've been watching you for 2 months. Through cameras at first, but then because I wanted to see you. The way you work with dignity. Talk about Emma. Visit my mother's portrait. You make me want to be better, braver, more human." They were inches apart, Marcus's thumb tracing her jaw, her hand against his chest where his heart hammered loud enough she had to feel it. "I'm falling for you too, and it terrifies me." Marcus leaned down, Victoria tilted up their lips, a breath apart, when Emma's voice shattered the moment. "Dad, Grandma wants to show Victoria my telescope." They sprang apart like teenagers caught, both breathing hard, flushed. Emma appeared oblivious. "Were you guys talking?" "Yeah, sweetheart. We'll be right there." After Emma left, Marcus and Victoria stood frozen, the almost kiss hanging unfinished. "Rain check." Victoria's voice shook. "Yeah, rain check." When Victoria left at 9, Marcus walked her to the car under wheeling stars. Ocean breathed salt air, and Victoria paused, hand on the driver's door. "Thank you for tonight, for letting me into your world. Thank you for coming, for fighting for Emma, for everything. Marcus, about what we said, I meant it. So did I. But I need to think about how this works. I don't want to hurt you or Emma. I understand." Victoria searched his face. "Do you work tomorrow night?" "Yes, then I'll see you at 11. We should talk, really talk. Not as employer and employee." Marcus felt hope kindle dangerous and bright. "I'd like that. This us, it's worth figuring out." Victoria smiled, soft and genuine, and entirely for him. "Yes, it is." He watched taillights disappear into Fogheart, doing things it hadn't done since Sarah was alive, mind spinning through possibilities, starting with the same impossible premise Victoria Stone cared about him. Not his potential or usefulness. She cared about Marcus, the man who cleaned her floors and raised his daughter and visited portraits at 3 a.m. She saw him, and what she saw was worth caring about. Inside, Helen was washing last dishes. She looked up, eyes twinkling. "She's lovely, Mom, and she looks at you like you hung the moon. Don't let pride ruin this. You deserve happiness." "What if I'm not ready? Sarah's been gone 3 years. She'd want you to live, not just survive." Marcus slumped against the counter. "I feel guilty. Like loving someone else means I didn't love Sarah enough." Helen pulled Marcus into a hug that had sustained him through childhood and his father's death and losing Sarah. Love doesn't divide, son. It multiplies. You can love Sarah's memory and love Victoria's presence. Both are real. Both matter. What if I mess this up? Then you apologize and try again. That's what good men do. And you are the best man I know. After Helen left, Marcus stood in the apartment that still smelled like Victoria's perfume and possibility. Tomorrow night he'd talk to Victoria, not about logistics or impossibility, about whatever was building between them, fragile and terrifying and more real than anything since grief had hollowed him out. He was scared. He was hopeful. He was falling for a woman who made burnt pancakes and defended his daughter and saw him as worthy of something beyond survival. That was Grace too. The scary kind that asked you to risk your heart when you'd sworn never to be that vulnerable again. Marcus thought about Sarah, about his promise to take care of Emma, about whether loving Victoria honored or betrayed that promise. Then he remembered Emma's note. "You make my dad smile. That's the best thing anyone could do." Sarah would want him to smile, would want Emma to have a mother figure who fought for her, would want Marcus to choose life over existence. Tomorrow night, he'd be brave enough to try. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm Marcus had never experienced before work and fatherhood, braided with something new. Something that made him check his phone during breaks and smile at thoughts he couldn't share with Emma yet. Victoria kept her distance during his shifts professional when Diana or other staff were present, but at 2:30 every morning she'd appear in the staff room with coffee already poured and they'd talk. Not about work, about everything else. Sarah came up often because Victoria asked and Marcus needed to speak her name aloud to someone who didn't flinch at ghosts. Victoria talked about her mother, about the fortress she'd built from fear, about discovering that surveillance showed everything except what mattered. They were learning each other in careful increments, testing whether this fragile thing between them could bear weight. Saturday arrived warm and clear, the kind of California afternoon that made tourists believe the whole state was paradise. Victoria had asked Marcus and Emma to dinner, a real date, she'd said somewhere public where they could be seen together and stop pretending this was just employer helping employee. Marcus had wanted to pay insisted actually, but Victoria had been gentle and firm. "Let me do this. Next time you choose the place and cover it." He'd agreed because Helen's voice echoed in his head about pride ruining good things, and because Emma was so excited she'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on the blue dress with constellations. Victoria picked them up in a rented SUV instead of the Tesla, a gesture Marcus appreciated more than he could articulate. The restaurant was Giuseppe's, the Italian place, where Marcus had washed dishes 3 years ago, right after Sarah died when no one else would hire him. He'd suggested it because the food was excellent and the prices were reasonable, not realizing until Victoria smiled that she understood exactly why he'd chosen it. Memory and gratitude, Victoria had said. Those matter more than Michelin stars. Giuseppe himself greeted them at the door, his weathered face breaking into genuine delight when he recognized Marcus. "My friend, too long you stay away." He embraced Marcus with enthusiasm, then turned to Victoria and Emma with equal warmth. "And this is your beautiful family." Yes, Marcus felt heat creep up his neck, but before he could correct the assumption, Victoria was extending her hand. Victoria Stone. "It's wonderful to meet you. Marcus has told us so much about your kindness." The meal started well. Emma charmed Giuseppe with questions about pasta making. Victoria relaxed in ways Marcus had never seen, and Marcus let himself believe for 90 minutes that maybe this could work. Then James Morrison walked in. Marcus saw him, first watched Morrison's eyes sweep the room and land on their table with recognition that curdled into something ugly. Morrison changed direction, approached with his wife trailing behind, looking uncomfortable. "Well," Morrison's voice carried, "isn't this cozy?" Victoria's expression went cold. "Mr. Morrison, I heard rumors about you two. Didn't believe them. But here you are, the billionaire and the janitor. How progressive. Emma's face went tight with confusion and hurt. Marcus started to stand, but Victoria's hand on his arm stopped him. We're having a private dinner, Mr. Morrison. I'm sure you can find another table. It's a public restaurant. I have as much right to be here as anyone, even people who don't belong in places like this. The implication hung poisonous. Marcus felt rage build hot, felt his hands ball into fists. But Emma was watching, and Morrison was baiting him. You should leave. Marcus kept his voice level. Before you say something, you'll regret. Regret. I regret that my son attends school with children who solve problems with violence. I regret that people like you think you deserve to sit at the same table as people like her. Before Marcus could respond, Giuseppe appeared between them, chef's apron dusted with flour face, carrying quiet fury. Mr. Morrison, you need to leave my restaurant. Morrison blinked. Excuse me, you're harassing my customers. Do you know who I am? Giuseppe's voice dropped but carried. I don't care. This man showed up here 3 years ago when my dishwasher quit. Worked nights for 2 months. Never complained. Never stole. Never treated anyone with less than respect. He's good people. You're not. Leave. The restaurant had gone quiet. A woman from a nearby table stood. We're with Marcus. Another voice. Yeah, get out of here. Giuseppe crossed his arms. You leaving, or do I call police? Morrison's wife tugged his sleeve. Morrison shot one last look at their table, then stalked out. The restaurant erupted in applause. Emma stared wide-eyed. Dad, everyone was on your side. Marcus felt something crack open. Because people remember kindness, sweetheart. Giuseppe returned with tiramisu. On the house. For my friend Marcus and his beautiful ladies. They finished dinner surrounded by warmth that had nothing to do with Morrison and everything to do with community recognizing one of its own. In the parking lot afterward, Emma already in the car, Victoria turned to Marcus. You worked here for 2 months after Sarah died. Giuseppe didn't care about my resume gap. Victoria moved closer. You never told me. It's just work. Honest work. No, it's character. Everyone in that restaurant saw it. Not because of you. Because 3 years ago, I washed dishes with the same care I clean your floors now. I know. That's why I'm falling for you. She said it clearly with Emma 10 feet away. Marcus felt his breath catch. People are watching. Let them watch. I'm tired of hiding what I feel. Emma tapped the window. Are you guys gonna kiss or just stand there? They both laughed the moment, breaking into something lighter, but no less significant. On the drive home, Emma chattered about Giuseppe and how Tyler's dad lost anyway. Marcus caught Victoria's eye in the mirror and saw his own wonder reflected back. That night, after Emma was asleep and Helen had gone home, Marcus sat on his balcony and called Victoria. Hi, hi. He could hear her smile. I had a good time tonight, even the Morrison part. Especially that. Watching an entire restaurant defend you because you washed dishes with dignity 5 years ago. That was everything I needed to know about who you are. Marcus stopped himself. I'm doing my best. Your best is extraordinary. Victoria paused. Marcus, I want to tell you something. I found Grace Turner. She's in Sacramento. My foundation stays in touch with grant recipients. I called her, told her about you, about us. Oh, she wants to meet you. Marcus's throat went tight. When this Saturday, if you're free, I'll drive us. You, me, Emma. The tears came unexpected. For 3 years, he'd carried gratitude like a weight, wanting to thank the woman who'd made Sarah's death bearable. Now Victoria had given him that gift. "Thank you." His voice broke. "Victoria, thank you. You deserve closure. And Grace deserves to know what her kindness meant." Saturday morning arrived cool and overcast. Emma had been vibrating with excitement all week. The drive to Sacramento took 3 hours through Central Valley farmland. Emma slept in the back while Marcus and Victoria talked quietly. "What if Grace doesn't want to see us?" Marcus asked. "She does. She told me your story about Sarah made her cry. She's been waiting 3 years to hear you say thank you." The drive to Sacramento unfolded in layers: urban sprawl giving way to suburbs, giving way to farmland that stretched flat and golden under morning sun. Victoria drove while Marcus sat passenger seat, and Emma slept in the back, exhausted from a week of excitement about meeting the nurse who'd helped her mother. "You okay?" Victoria glanced at Marcus, reading tension in his shoulders. "Nervous?" Marcus stared out the window at orchards passing in geometric rows. "What if I can't find the words I've been carrying this thank you for 3 years? And now that I'm actually going to say it, I don't know how." "You'll find them. When you see Grace, the words will come." What if she doesn't remember Sarah? 3 years is a long time. She's cared for hundreds of patients since then. She'll remember. Victoria's voice was certain. "The foundation stays in close contact with grant recipients. Grace keeps a journal about every patient. She remembers them all." Marcus absorbed this. A journal. Grace had written about Sarah, had documented those final weeks in the way nurses did when they cared about their patients as people instead of case numbers. The thought made his chest tight. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria's voice was careful, like she was testing whether the question was allowed. "Always. Why didn't you try harder to find Grace? After Sarah died, I mean. You called the hospital once and stopped." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the landscape blur past. Because finding her felt like admitting Sarah was really gone. As long as Grace was missing, I could pretend that chapter wasn't closed, that someday I'd thank her, and that would be the end of grieving. Finding her meant facing that there is no end. You just learn to carry it. Victoria reached across the console and took his hand. Her skin was soft against his calluses, warm and alive. "You're going to be okay today. We're all going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because you're not alone anymore. You have me. You have Emma. You have your mother. You're not the man who lost Sarah 3 years ago, trying to survive on his own. You're the man who built a life from that loss. Grace is going to see that." The orchards gave way to flat farmland crops Marcus didn't recognize growing in irrigated rows. They passed fruit stands and tiny towns and billboards advertising injury lawyers and Jesus in equal measure. Emma woke around the 2-hour mark groggy and asking if they were there yet. "Another 30 minutes, sweetheart." Marcus turned to check on her. "You doing okay?" "I'm nervous. What if Miss Grace thinks it's weird we came all this way just to say thank you? It's not weird." Victoria caught Emma's eye in the rearview mirror. "It's beautiful. Most people never get to know how their kindness affected others. You're giving her a gift by telling her." Emma considered this. "Did you ever meet people your foundation helped not before Marcus?" Victoria's voice carried something like regret. "I just signed checks and reviewed reports. I never thought about the faces behind the numbers. Your dad taught me I should have been paying attention all along. You couldn't have known." Marcus squeezed her hand. "The foundation helped 300 people. You can't have personal relationships with all of them. No." But I could have tried to understand that they weren't just data points. They were Grace Turner making Sarah's death bearable. They were Marcus whispering thank you to a portrait. They were Emma growing up knowing her mother was loved. The GPS announced they were 10 minutes from their destination. Emma sat up straighter, checking her reflection in the window and smoothing her hair. Marcus's stomach clenched with anxiety that felt like stage fright. In 10 minutes, he'd see Grace Turner for the first time since Sarah's funeral. In 10 minutes, he'd finally be able to say the words he'd been practicing for 3 years. What if I cry? Marcus's voice was barely audible. Then you cry. Victoria pulled into a parking lot near the Capitol building. Grace has sat with hundreds of grieving families. She's not going to judge you for having feelings. What if I can't stop crying? Then I'll hold you until you can. And Emma will too. And Grace will understand, because that's what she does. They sat in the parked car for a moment, all three of them gathering courage. Emma reached forward from the back seat and put her small hands on both their shoulders. We're a team. Emma's voice was firm. Teams support each other. So if Dad cries, we support him. If Grace cries, we support her. If anyone needs anything, we're all here. Okay, when did you get so wise? Marcus turned to look at his daughter. I've always been wise, Emma grinned. You just finally started listening. Victoria laughed, and Marcus felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. They were doing this. They were walking into Grace Turner's office and closing a circle that had been open for 3 years. And they were doing it together. Okay. Marcus took a deep breath. Let's go. Grace's office was in a modest building near the Capitol. She was waiting outside when they pulled up. Marcus saw her through the windshield, older now, silver in her hair, and couldn't move. Emma was out of the car first. Miss Grace, I'm Emma. You helped my mom. Grace knelt. Emma, you were just a baby when I knew your mother. Look at you now. I don't remember her much, but Dad tells me stories. He says you made her last days good. Your mother was a beautiful soul, and she loved you so much. Marcus finally found strength to get out. Victoria appeared beside him, her hand finding his. They walked to where Grace stood holding Emma's hands. Grace looked up, and recognition dawned. Marcus Bennett. Marcus couldn't speak. Grace released Emma and moved to him, taking both his hands. How are you? I'm okay. Because of you. They moved inside to Grace's office, 5 chairs in a circle. Grace's supervisor sat as witness but stayed quiet. Victoria explained the connection, her mother's death leading to Grace's testimony, Grace losing her job, Victoria's foundation helping rebuild Grace working at Pacific Regional, where Sarah had been treated. Marcus added his piece, the newspaper photo, the job at Victoria's estate, the nightly vigils. Grace listened, tears flowing. When they finished, she was quiet before speaking. My whole career, I've cared for dying patients. I lose people. It's the nature of oncology. I rarely get to see what happens after. Rarely know if the families survived. She looked at Marcus and Emma and Victoria. Knowing that Sarah's death led to this, to you and Victoria. To Emma having a new family, that's everything I needed to hear. I never got to thank you. Marcus leaned forward. You sat with Sarah when I had to leave. You held her hand, made her feel human instead of just dying. You gave my wife dignity, and you gave me strength. I was doing my job. No, you went beyond your job. You showed up when you didn't have to. That wasn't protocol. That was grace. Grace pulled a small journal from her desk. I write about my patients. I thought you might want to hear what I wrote about Sarah. She read aloud. Sarah Bennett, 38, lung cancer stage 4. Today she asked me, "Will my daughter remember me?" I held her hand and said, "She'll remember your love because your husband will make sure of it." Sarah smiled. "Marcus is a good man. The best man. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving them." I told her, "Then leave them with love. That's all that lasts." Grace looked up. She did. And when she passed, her husband held her hand and whispered, "I promise. I'll take care of Emma. I'll tell her every day how much you loved her." That's Grace Marcus. That's what I witnessed. Marcus broke. 3 years of holding together shattered, and he sobbed. Victoria held him from one side, Emma from the other, and Grace sat witness present, compassionate, making space for grief without shame. When Marcus could breathe, Grace spoke softly. "You kept your promise. Emma knows she was loved. You've honored Sarah's memory by living fully. I couldn't have done it without you. You reminded me I was human, not just broken. You were never broken, Marcus. Just grieving. There's a difference." They stayed another hour. Emma showed Grace photos. Sarah's last birthday, Emma's first day of school, the telescope. Grace shared memories of Sarah's kindness, her humor. Victoria mostly listened, bearing witness to closure 3 years in the making. When they left, Grace hugged each of them. "Thank you for finding me, for telling me this story. Thank you for making it bearable." Marcus pulled back. "You saved more than Sarah's dignity. You saved my family." The drive home was quiet. Emma asleep, Marcus processing. Victoria reached across and took his hand. "You okay? Better than okay. I got to close that circle. After 3 years, I finally got to say thank you. She deserved to hear it." Marcus lifted Victoria's hand, kissed it gently. "So do you. Thank you for making this possible, for caring enough to find Grace, for fighting for Emma, for seeing me." Victoria's eyes glistened. "I love you, Marcus." It was the first time either had said it directly. Marcus felt the words settle into his chest. "I love you too, Victoria." They drove home in comfortable silence, hands linked two people who'd lost everything. Learning that sometimes love didn't end when someone died. It transformed, became memory, became courage to try again. Monday morning, Marcus's phone rang. An unknown number. Marcus Bennett. "This is David Morgan from Morgan & Associates." Marcus sat up. Morgan & Associates, his old accounting firm. "Mr. Morgan, I heard through the network that you're still in the area. I owe you an apology. We should have been more flexible when your wife was ill." Marcus didn't know what to say. "I'm calling because Richard Peterson is retiring. Senior associate position. $95,000 a year. I thought of you. You were always talented. I know you've had it rough. This is a real offer." Marcus's mind spun. 95,000, 6 times what he made as a janitor. He could pay off debt in 2 years. Move Emma to a better apartment. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take a week." "But Marcus, you'd be an asset to this firm." After they hung up, Marcus sat staring at his phone. Return to accounting, the profession he'd built. Or stay at the estate work with Victoria, build something new. He called his mother. Helen listened, then asked, "Which one makes you happy?" "I don't know. I'm good at accounting, but I don't love it." "Do you love working with Victoria?" "Yes, but her offer is 85,000. Morgan's is 95. So it's about money. Emma needs stability." Helen's voice was gentle. "Who said love and providing were different things? Victoria's offering you a career respect purpose. She's offering Emma a mother who fights for her. She's offering you a future where you wake up wanting to go to work. But the money is less important than you think. Your father made half what other contractors made because he chose jobs based on people, not paychecks. We were happy. Emma will remember how you treat people, not an extra $10,000 a year. That night, Marcus talked to Emma about both offers. Emma listened with gravity beyond her years. Which job makes you happy, Dad? Victoria's. But Morgan pays more. Do you like accounting? I'm good at it. But no. Do you like working with Victoria? Very much. Do you love her? Yes, sweetheart, I do. Then why is this complicated? If you love what you do and love who you work with, that's called lucky. Being lucky is better than being rich. Marcus pulled Emma into a hug. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just finally started listening. Wednesday morning, Marcus called David Morgan. Thank you for the offer. It means more than you know. But I'm going to decline. Can I ask why? Because I spent 7 years doing a job I was good at but didn't love. My wife died. I learned life's too short for that. I'm choosing something different this time. Something that matters. Morgan was quiet. Good for you, Marcus, truly. Then Marcus called Victoria. I'll take the position, on one condition. What's that? I earn it. No special treatment because we're together. I wouldn't expect anything less. And I pay off my own medical debt. Marcus, I wasn't going to offer. That's yours to handle. But I will help you create a budget if you want. I'd like that. There was a pause. So you're staying with me? I'm staying. For as long as you'll have me. How about forever? Marcus smiled. Forever works. 6 months transformed the estate. Marcus's first act as director of household well-being had been converting the surveillance room into an employee resource center. The monitors that had displayed empty corridors now showed staff schedules, emergency fund applications, community calendars. Same technology, different purpose. The emergency fund started with $250,000 from Victoria's account and had already helped 12 families. Marcus administered it with the same care he'd applied to cleaning floors, understanding dignity mattered as much as dollars. He'd instituted flexible scheduling, mental health support, education grants for staff children. The culture shifted from employer-employee to community. People smiled more, spoke freely. Victoria's business transformed too. Sentinel Defense Systems pivoted to security through humanity technology that protected without dehumanizing. Her TED Talk on surveillance versus trust had 8 million views. The company thrived. Marcus and Emma had moved to a modest house 15 minutes from the estate. 3 bedrooms, small yard mortgage, Victoria co-signed. Emma had her own room with space for the telescope. No more night shifts. Marcus was present for breakfast, homework, the thousands of small moments that made childhood. The medical debt stood at $138,000, down from $147,000. Marcus paid $1,000 a month now, instead of $800. At this rate, he'd be clear in 11 years, instead of never. They hadn't moved in together yet. Emma needed time to adjust. But Victoria spent weekends at their house, and they spent weeknights at the estate. Emma called her Aunt Victoria in public, and just Victoria in private. Sunday morning pancakes, Tuesday evening stargazing, Friday movie nights with Helen. The transformation hadn't been instant. Change never was. But 6 months had given Marcus time to build systems that honored people instead of just monitoring them, to create community instead of just employment. The first staff meeting in his new role had been tense. 15 employees gathered in what used to be the surveillance room, surrounded by monitors Marcus had promised would soon display schedules instead of hallways looking at him with expressions that ranged from skeptical to cautiously hopeful. They knew him as the night janitor who never caused trouble. They didn't know him as a director. I'm not going to pretend I know how to do this perfectly. Marcus had stood at the front of the room, feeling like an imposter, but I know what it's like to work hard and feel invisible. To show up every day and wonder if anyone notices or cares. My job is to make sure you're seen, that your work matters, that you matter. The emergency fund had been his first initiative. Victoria had given him authority over a $250,000 discretionary budget with one instruction: use it to help people. Marcus had created an application process that balanced dignity with documentation. Employees could request assistance for genuine emergencies without having to humiliate themselves with proof of poverty. The housekeeper whose son needed emergency surgery got it. The groundskeeper whose mother lost her home to fire got temporary housing assistance. The chef whose daughter's college tuition came due got an education grant that didn't require repayment, just a commitment to pay it forward when able. 12 families helped in 6 months. 12 families who didn't have to choose between medical care and rent, between education and electricity, between the impossible options poverty forced on people every day. But the money was just structure. This culture change was harder. Diana had been skeptical at first. You can't buy loyalty, Marcus. People will take the help and resent you for the power imbalance it creates. I'm not trying to buy loyalty. Marcus had been firm. I'm trying to remove barriers that prevent good people from doing good work. Medical debt kept me from being present for Emma. I don't want anyone else living that way. It took 3 months before the staff started believing he meant it. Before they stopped seeing him as management and started seeing him as one of them who'd gotten lucky enough to have a billionaire fall in love with him. The turning point had been Juan, the head groundskeeper, whose father had a stroke in Mexico. Juan had come to Marcus expecting to be fired for requesting 2 weeks off. Instead, Marcus had helped him navigate international medical care, had arranged for Juan's salary to continue, had connected him with the Foundation's network of patient advocates. Juan had returned 2 weeks later with his father recovering and had thrown his arms around Marcus in the middle of the garden. Thank you. You saved him. Juan had been crying. You saved my father. You saved him by being there. Marcus had held the man who'd kept the estate's 15 acres immaculate for 8 years. I just made it possible for you to be there. Word had spread after that. Marcus wasn't management pretending to care. He was one of them who understood that employment wasn't just about labor. It was about the whole person, the family they supported, the emergencies that didn't care about work schedules. The flexible scheduling came next. Parents could swap shifts to attend school events. People could take mental health days without losing pay or having to pretend they had the flu. If you needed time, you asked for time. And as long as the work got done, and someone covered for you, the time was yours. Victoria had worried at first. What if people abuse it? Then we address it individually. Marcus had been patient, but most people don't abuse trust. They've just never been given enough to know how to handle it. 6 months in, no one had abused it. Productivity had actually increased as stress decreased and loyalty grew. People worked harder when they felt valued, when they knew their employer saw them as humans instead of just hands to complete tasks. The culture shift rippled outward. Staff started eating lunch together instead of in isolation. Families visited the estate on weekends, children playing in gardens their parents maintained. The house that had been Victoria's fortress became a hub where community gathered, where people supported each other, where tragedy like what Marcus had survived was met with institutional help instead of individual drowning. This is what your foundation was supposed to be. Marcus had told Victoria one night after a staff barbecue where 50 people had gathered, not just grants for strangers, support for the people right in front of us. We could do both. Victoria had been looking at him with an expression that made his heart race. Scale this model. Make it the Foundation's core mission. And they had. The Bennett Stone Community Center was still 6 months from official launch, but the prototype was working. People were being helped. Families were staying intact. Medical emergencies didn't mean financial catastrophe. Single parents could be present for their children. Grace was alive in the policy. Sarah's death had meaning in the structure. Margaret's foundation had found its purpose in the daily practice of seeing people and choosing to help. Giuseppe catered their 6-month celebration. The estate's garden filled with 60 people, staff, and families, Emma's class, including Tyler Morrison, Helen, and Grace Turner, who'd flown in Diana and Tom. Children chased through flower beds. Adults clustered, discussing everything. Music played. Marcus stood with Victoria on the patio, watching community celebrate itself. Emma was showing Tyler her rock collection. Helen and Grace were deep in conversation. This is perfect. It is. Thank you for building this. We built it together. Marcus knew what he wanted to do next. He'd been carrying the ring for 2 weeks. This was it. Surrounded by community, with Emma close with Grace and Helen present. He stepped away, moved to the center, and cleared his throat. The crowd quieted. Emma looked up, face bright with understanding she'd helped pick the ring. Marcus's hands shook as he pulled the box from his pocket. 6 months ago, I was a janitor working nights to pay off medical debt. I was surviving, not living. Then Victoria Stone offered my daughter refuge, and everything changed. He turned to Victoria, who'd gone still, hand over her mouth. She fought for Emma when a wealthy lawyer tried to destroy her. She found Grace Turner, so I could say thank you. She saw me not as the janitor, but as a man worth knowing. She taught me surveillance isn't safety, connection is. Marcus knelt. Emma came to stand beside him, holding his hand. Victoria, 6 months ago, you offered me a job, but you gave me so much more. Hope. Emma, a mother figure. A family. I don't have much. Medical debt, a co-signed mortgage, a used car. But I have love, integrity, a promise to show up every day for you and Emma and this community. Victoria Stone, will you marry me? Tears streamed down Victoria's face. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Marcus slipped the ring on simple gold band with modest diamond within budget, but chosen with care, and stood to kiss her while the crowd erupted. Emma tackled them both. She said yes. Grace appeared beside them. Sarah would be so proud. You honored her by learning to love again. Giuseppe was crying into his apron. The celebration continued into evening. Marcus danced with Emma first, while Victoria watched. Then with Helen, who whispered, I told you not to let pride ruin this. Then with Grace, who said love ripples forward. Then, finally, with Victoria. They swayed while the sun set, a painting sky in colors cameras couldn't capture. Around them, community celebrated children playing adults, talking Giuseppe, arguing about tiramisu technique, Helen teaching Diana to waltz. I can't believe this is real. Believe it. 6 months ago, I cleaned your floors. Now I'm going to be your husband. You were never just the janitor. I know. It took me a while to learn that. They danced until stars came out and Emma declared she could see Jupiter's moons. Half the party crowded around while Emma explained celestial mechanics. Tyler asked questions without mockery. Grace and Helen watched. Giuseppe declared this the best party in 40 years. Marcus stood with Victoria's hand in his and looked at what they'd built. Not a fortress, a home. Not isolation, connection, not survival, life. 1 year later, they married on the same cliffside. 50 guests, simple ceremony, ocean view. The portrait of Margaret Stone positioned where she could witness a framed photo of Sarah beside it. Emma was flower girl walking down the aisle, scattering petals. Grace stood as Victoria's matron of honor. Tom served as Marcus's best man. The officiant was brief. We gather to witness Marcus and Victoria unite. Their love story is unconventional. Employer and employee, billionaire and janitor. But love doesn't care about tax brackets. It cares about character. Marcus's vows came from his heart. Victoria, when I met you, I was broken, drowning in debt and grief. You saw me anyway, not the janitor, just Marcus. You fought for Emma. You loved her like she was yours. You taught me surveillance isn't safety, connection is. I promise to show up every day, to work hard, to love you fiercely. I promise to be the man Emma sees, steady, honest, present. I promise to build a life where every person feels valued. I love you, Victoria Stone. I'm honored to be your husband. Victoria's vows carried transformation's weight. Marcus, when you started working at my estate, I watched you through cameras. I saw you visit my mother's portrait every night. I didn't understand why. Now I know you were witnessing grace. You taught me screens can show everything except what matters. You taught me dignity comes from character, not money. You taught me to trust, to love, to be human again. I promise to honor your past, to love Emma as my own, to support your dreams. I promise never to take you for granted, to see you, really see you. I promise to build a community where everyone has value. I love you, Marcus Bennett. I'm honored to be your wife. Emma brought rings. Don't drop them, Dad. They exchanged simple gold bands, matching and equal. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Marcus kissed Victoria tenderly. The crowd erupted. The reception was Giuseppe's gift. They danced Marcus and Victoria to... At last, then Marcus and Emma to my girl. Grace gave a toast acknowledging Sarah and Margaret and second chances. Helen cried happy tears. Tyler caught the garter and went bright red. As sunset painted the sky, Marcus and Victoria stepped away to stand at the cliff edge, watching the Pacific swallow the sun. Around them, the estate pulsed with laughter and life. We did it. Yeah, we did. Any regrets? Just one. Marcus's heart skipped. What Victoria smiled. That I didn't find you sooner. We found each other exactly when we needed to. They kissed as the sun disappeared, as the party continued, as Emma's voice carried explaining to anyone who'd listen that her dad just married the coolest person ever. Marcus heard his daughter's joy and felt Victoria's heartbeat and understood this was grace, not the absence of pain, the transformation of it. That night, as guests departed, Marcus stood with Victoria and Emma looking at the portraits, Margaret Stone in her blue dress, Sarah Bennett with her smile, two women who'd never met but whose deaths had connected strangers. Emma yawned. Can we go home now? Yes, sweetheart. Victoria knelt. Let's go home. All three of us. They walked out together, past where cameras used to record everything and capture nothing. Past the foyer Marcus had mopped 1,000 times. Past the kitchen where they'd fallen in love, the estate wasn't Victoria's anymore. It was theirs. Home. At the car, Emma looked up. "Dad, are you happy?" Marcus knelt, pulled his daughter close. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good. Mom would like Victoria." Marcus felt tears sting. "I think so too, sweetheart. Victoria joined them. I hope I'm worthy of that." Marcus stood, pulled Victoria into an embrace that included Emma. "You are. You always have been." They drove away into a future that stretched bright and uncertain and full of possibility. Marcus felt Sarah's presence one last time. Not sadness, approval. She'd want this for him, for Emma. Grace Turner had taught him love didn't end when someone died. It transformed, became memory, became strength, became courage to try again. Marcus had tried, had shown up, had loved fiercely, had earned the respect of a community and the heart of a remarkable woman. 2 years later, Marcus stood before Margaret Stone's portrait in daylight. He came weekly, bringing fresh flowers, talking to the painting. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything your death created." Life had settled into new rhythms. Emma was 11, thriving in science programs, still dreaming of astronauts. Marcus and Victoria had adopted 5-year-old James from foster care. The boy was learning family meant showing up. The medical debt was paid. The estate had become the Bennett Stone Community Center, serving 200 families. Marcus served as executive director. Victoria ran Sentinel Defense while chairing the center's board. Diana managed operations. Grace volunteered monthly. The transformation was complete fortress to home isolation, to community survival, to flourishing. Victoria appeared with Emma and James. "Ready to go. Grace is waiting." Marcus nodded. "Until next week, Margaret. Your legacy lives on." Emma looked at the portrait. Grandma Margaret was cool, huh? The coolest. They left together, family complete, circle closed, home found. Marcus Bennett had lost his first wife to cancer and found his second through grace. He'd raised his daughter with love and built a community through dignity. He'd learned the lesson that mattered most second chances existed. For widowers. For billionaires. For anyone brave enough to show up with integrity and trust that love found a way. That was Sarah's final gift. Grace's living testament. Margaret's lasting legacy, and Marcus's daily practice. To witness grace, to be grace, to live fully, love fiercely, and never forget character wins. Always.